She's just taking over everything. Okay, should we start?
Yes.
All right, Avatar Meherabad. Yay! So the revised title for this is Subtle Physiology and the Perfect Man, Al-Insan Al-Kamil. So I imagine it'll probably communicate better if we do all of this in Arabic, Al-Insan Al-Kamil. That means it's a phrase given importance by Ibn Arabi, meaning the perfect man. So the subject that I'm really talking about is the human form as an image of the divine. And I didn't come to this out of any previous interest of my own, but rather I've kept noticing in Baba's own discourses and messages, really from beginning to end, indications that this is a dimension of reality, that the human form is indeed an image of the cosmic or the cosmology and an image of God in various ways. It's kept coming up. So I've explored it somewhat. And so what this would really be is just my own presenting as best I can of pieces. Because what Baba had to say about this was never gathered together and summed up by him, ever, in any one place. But there are enough things he said, in my opinion, as to leave it beyond all doubt that the human form is deeply significant. And there's a deep meaningfulness in it. Now there may be some of you here who would have approached this topic in your own ways, like some people into therapy, medicine, yoga. Yoga has explored this in other spiritual traditions. Sufism has its own version of the subtle physiology is a term for this, the parts of the human anatomy, both gross and subtle in their significance. Taoism has it also. So this is an aspect of the reality of things that really would connect with some of the world's great spiritual traditions. And I feel just sure that in the future, this is really going to be developed a lot and become very important. I don't really know much about it. So I'm just going to be presenting some of the things that I have noticed. But I do feel this is my own I'll try to say when I'm just saying my own ideas and speculations. And, so if you want to hear a donkey bray, well then stay on. I don't have any spiritual knowledge at all. But it does occur to me that Baba, as God in human form, this has a deep significance as to what the avatar is. So I wanted to say a few things about that also. But again, chime in. There may be some of you who have explored this in all sorts of ways that could be useful, or you might just have questions or objections. I mean, you can always throw an egg or a tomato if it's...
Not in Baba's house.
Not in Baba's house. No food in Baba's house.
Not even in Australia.
You don't do it in Australia?
That's right.
No, it's assault.
It's a crime.
I see.
Well,
Well, that really limits expressive. Sometimes there's nothing, let's say it with a tomato, there's nothing else that's quite so good. Okay, well, I guess if you don't want to get carted off to jail, you'll just have to say it with your mouths. Okay, so this, in a sense, is a bit scattered because I'm just going to be talking about pieces. That's all that I really have been able to find. Here is in the Tiffin lectures, there is in fact an appendix on this topic, and I've gathered from my gurus on the topic that subtle physiology is the current term for this. That is, the human physiology as symbolic or representative or related to some kind of a cosmological macrocosm in one way or another. So this appendix begins this way. I'm going to read a bit from it because it helps to explain the topic. By the expression subtle physiology, we mean to designate those branches of esoteric spiritual tradition that deal with the symbolic or archetypal significance of the human form. The idea that the human body itself images or mirrors God can be found in the Torah and runs through the history of Judaic and Christian tradition. In Sufi literature, especially in the tradition of the perfect master Ibn al-Arabi, the perfect human, or al-insan al-kamil. You'll see these words a lot, actually, in God Speaks if you dig into it. Kamil is perfect and insan is man or human. Stands as the perfectly mirrored image of God and the locus for God's fullest self-disclosure. In these systems, the human form is the microcosm to some kind of a divine image or divine order on the universal scale, which comprises the macrocosm. So there's the definition, if you can following that, there's a definition of subtle physiology, as we're using it here. In Hinduism and certain Buddhist traditions as well, the perception that the human form stands as the microcosm to greater domains of spirituality has been highly developed through various yogic and meditational lines, such as Kundalini or Laya Yoga or Tantra, whose theory and practice have pervaded the cultural and religious and intellectual milieu of the Indian subcontinent on many levels, particularly since medieval times. Hatha Yoga has a certain connection to this too. Hatha in its origins, modern Western Hatha Yoga sometimes is just about, can become physical exercises predominantly, but in its origins, it has a lot more of this metaphysics to it. Others, I'm sure, will know much more about this than I do. I've never done Hatha Yoga. Medieval and modern Taoist and Neo-Confucian traditions sometimes exhibit the same disposition to map out a microcosmography. So a cosmography is mapping the cosmos on a micro scale. That is, the whole cosmos being mapped out on the human body, whereby greater cosmological principles get inscribed in the inner landscape of the human body, with its channels and meridians governing the circulation of chi. When Meherabad touches on these themes, then, he is linking into a vast, sometimes subterranean network of interconnecting streams and currents in the great scriptural and esoteric literatures of the world. Okay, I'm going to read a little more of this. Though Meherabad never treated this topic in one place systematically, scattered allusions over the course of his life make it clear that he did indeed invest the human form with a symbolic or archetypal or paradigmatic significance, though it is hard to discover a single scheme or frame of reference that explains all of his comments on this topic. Yet Meherabad did explain that the human, and this is something, if anyone knows otherwise, please correct me, but this seems to originate with Meherabad, as far as I know. I've never seen anywhere where this was said before, that the human form inheres in every form in creation. Every form in creation is actually the human form. Have any of you ever encountered that anywhere else? I've seen the Torah says man was made in the image of God, but that doesn't exactly say that every form, every tree, every particle is the human form. But Meherabad did say that. He said it unambiguously, early and late. Indeed, the process of evolution, this is another one of the topics, we'll look at some of the literature on it, as he described it, consists in the progressive unfoldment of the human form that is latent in evolution from the very outset. So Baba's darshana, I'm using that word for his spiritual philosophy, one of its central ideas is the divine theme, the evolution of consciousness. And he made it very clear that it's actually the human form that is unfolding and unpacking throughout the entire course of the evolution of consciousness until you reach human form where it's fully manifest. That too, as far as I know, is a new idea that has never been given before.
And the anthroposophists definitely talk about how all these different forms are connected, but I haven't studied it enough to know if it
Yes.
goes on to the human form.
Yeah. It'll be interesting for people who know about that. Now, a lot of the things, some of this, I actually tend to look, once you get to about 1500, the year 1500 of me, it's so modern that I'm not interested after that. But I think a lot of things that may have flowered in the 20th century, I personally suspect that this may be in consequence of the Advent and Baba's own work coming out through the mental planes and subtle planes. So we may have some of these things manifesting in the 20th century. That's what I would know the least about. About the year 800 is, for me, very congenial. So this is, in a broad sense, and let me just make the last connection of these topics. If you're talking about the human form being inherent in, even Baba said the atom, in the electron. He said in stone, the human form is inherent. That to me, and Baba never said this, so this is my own, speculation or drawing inferences. Baba said that part of the significance of the avatar is it's God becomes man. That's how the avatar differs from a perfect master. And if there is only one single form in all of creation, in innumerable refractions, or I'm forgetting what there's a mathematical term for varied manifestations, reflections of the same form, that to me suggests how the avatar would become everything. If there's one, let's say, archetype that is inherent in everyone, by becoming that, he becomes our very formality as well. So it seems to me that idea I find to be very appealing anyway, although Baba never exactly said that. Did that make sense? No. If there's one form in creation, if the avatar is the God becoming that, he is becoming that in everyone and in everything. So here are a couple of the things Baba said. I'm going to just look at a few right at the start. This is early. This was published in the Meherabad Message in 1929. Though there are millions of nominal forms through which the soul has to pass before it can incarnate in the human form, yet, strictly speaking, there is only one form, viz. The human form, from the beginning to the end. I mean, this is actually an amazing idea. I really think it is quite remarkable. And why? Just because the human form is latent in all the previous forms, including the electron. But in order that the human form may be completely manifested, the soul has to pass through all the different countless forms. In other words, The different forms in the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms are nothing but the human form in its latent state, which becomes completely manifested as a human body in a human being. Let it be carefully noted that the latent human form takes 4 straight turns and afterwards 1 inverse turn. In all, 5 turns before it becomes completely manifested. So we're going to look a little bit at these 5 turns, and unfortunately, it seems to me that Baba's original dictations on this got garbled, and all the different write-ups of this are quite confusing, and I can't make sense of them for my own part. At least the 3rd and 4th turns are muddled. Here's another broad statement. This is from what we just saw. It was from 1929. It got published. But here's an important statement from God Speaks much later, and you can see the same thing. God is a macrocosm. God is a microcosm. And God is also beyond both. Knowingly, man is body and man is mind, but unknowingly, as in deep sleep, man is also beyond both. Okay, now here's the critical statement. And this, to me, is a definitive, it seems to me, irrefutable indication that there is a truth to the whole thing of subtle physiology. Analogically, it is true that man is made in the image of God. The top of his head represents the Vigyan Bhumika, Arshayala, the highest spiritual state or the seat of Brahman. And that Brahman means, he's using it in the Vedantic sense of the reality, with a capital R, the reality that is God, not the creator God, it's the reality. The forehead corresponds to the entrance to divinity. The center of the forehead, just above the 2 external eyes, is the seat of the inner or 3rd eye, that point right there. And then he's talking about the 7-fold veil, which we'll look at presently, which is all about this, or that is vitally relevant. You know the chapter in God Speaks called the 7-fold veil. And it has a very strange discussion of going into the openings in the face as part of the journey of evolution between the 1st and the 5th plane. And this is actually very related to many things that we'll see Baba has said. So here's another statement from God Speaks relating to this. And here's another from God Speaks. Let's see. Okay, this is from the 10 States of God chapter. And, so, nominally, this was written by Erich. So if you don't like it, you can just say that Erich messed up. Okay. Before the human form becomes, although, as we were saying the other week, it's probably Ghani. Erich would say, it wasn't me, it was Ghani. Before the human form becomes, okay, here we go. So that you'll see how related this is to what we just read from the Mirror Message in 1929. Strictly speaking, there is only one form, the human form, which is latent in all of the previous forms. The mineral, the plant, and the animal forms actually contain the human form in its latent state. And this is gradually and increasingly manifested until it is at last completely expressed as a human being in a human body. Before the human form becomes completely manifested in a human body, such as a man or a woman, the latent human form makes a series of partial turns. So we just saw in 1929 Baba talking about the 5 turns. Well, here the 5 turns come up again. And once again, they're quite confusing to me anyway. In the crystal and rock state, such as granite, the latent human form is completely upside down and is almost so in the plant state as well. Now, elsewhere, Baba has not said upside down in a stone form. He said it's lying recumbent, and the first turn is the plant form going to upside down. As the forms progress or evolve, the axis of the body rotates slowly so that it becomes more and more horizontal, excuse me. And when we reach the higher vertebrates, we find the head rising up more and more as the axis of the human body approaches the vertical. In men and women, we find the human form completely expressed and completely vertical. And I have always thought that Leonardo da Vinci was really inspired with this. It seems to me, I don't know enough, I've never studied the Vitruvian Man and the history of it, but just to look at it, it seems to be expressing what Baba had just talked about. This is the human form, I have completed evolution. I'm standing. Actually, in that Francis's Word at World's End, which some of you sing, you're talking about coming through evolution and standing up as a man. Well, how do the lines go?
Stood up.
Stood up.
Beating his chest.
Yeah, can't you see it?
Unable to
Bear.
not being man. Endure not being man.
Yeah.
That's the gorilla. Yes.
Yeah.
The gorilla, and then
Okay, and then finally,
eventually he turns.
this seems to me to express that idea magnificently. And you can see if the human form has been latent since an electron, when finally it is manifested. Wow, what a glorious experience that must be. What an achievement that is. So that's what Francis II is writing about. So where were we? We were here. I want to read a little bit more of this. Vertical, completely expressed and completely vertical. The details of this evolution of form are extremely complex. Okay, I'll read through this. There are, for example, certain forms of stone, metal, plant, and animal that have what Meherabad described as a special seat in evolution. And some of this new material on Baba's talk from your ashram boys, Jeff has been helping me with this, and Kian going through this. We'll look at a little bit of it presently. We've learned some new ones, like it seems that the tortoise is one of these forms between the different kingdoms. Of course, you in Australia can take great pride in launching the animal series with the kangaroo. That's actually one of these too. One of these special seats in evolution. These key species of forms are mostly those that are milestones in the evolutionary road, and they mark the first and the last of a certain general class of species of forms. For example, the first species of bird form to follow the last species of fish form, and the first species of animal form to follow the last species of the bird form, have a special seat significance in evolution. And now I had always heard the word Barzak used. This is a big term in Sufism, much bigger than just this, but I've been looking and can't find where I saw it. If anybody knows.
Advancing life stream, maybe.
Okay, there's a thought. I looked in Beams and it wasn't there. Maybe I just heard talk by Evidus or somebody.
No, it's
Might have
it.
been Ivy Juices.
I think it's in one of the. No, I don't think it's Ivy Juice's book. I think it's one of those beams or
It's not in Beams, I looked
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
the advancing life stream.
Okay, any other ideas I'd really welcome. I'd like to see Barzak. Have you heard the word Barzak? It's an isthmus, a piece of land between two seas, and it's a very major concept in Ibn Arabi and his school. The word isn't used here. By the way, the first species of bird form appears to be something like a I guess I have to use the proper word for it, a chuck. Have I said it right? I would have said chicken, but
Oh, you mean a chicken? A chook?
a chook.
I thought you meant a chuck is a bird as well.
Oh, no, I meant a chook.
A chook.
As in the Bow's thing, the
Yeah,
mischievous chook.
chicken.
And the last one, the last bird form is, actually I'm mistaken about that. That's the last comes to, the first is a waterfowl. I got carried away by the chook thing.
Yeah.
It's a waterfowl of some kind, because they're coming
Yeah.
out of the water with fish. And the last is basically a land bound bird form with what Baba described. He doesn't use the word, but a waddle of some sort.
Wasn't there some mention that the last bird form was a pelican and the first animal form was a kangaroo?
The
Was
first
that right?
animal form is a kangaroo. I haven't heard a pelican though.
Okay.
No,
okay.
but bush turkey.
A bush turkey.
Bullshit.
Cassowary.
How about an emu? But they don't have waddles.
No, but cassowaries do.
Baba described, he didn't use the word, he was describing to the boys that sort of gangly red bag
Well,
of
that's a
flesh.
pelican,
It's
isn't it?
definitely a paradox.
Yeah.
No, that's the pelican's beak.
Yeah.
That's a piece. No, it's a bush,
No,
it's a scrub turkey, John.
And Baba seems to have indicated to the boys that the last form when you're coming from worm into fish is some sort of a tortoise. When you're getting into the water and burrowing into it like that. So we have I think gosh, I shouldn't say what the last plant form is, I'm not sure. Meher Baba tells us that this whole theme has been explained down to the last detail in his own
In
book.
his book.
So come on, John, tell us. Unless the termites ate it when they were eating books in your house a few years ago.
That's
Did
true.
they eat the book? Okay, so then there's also, all right, so here we have some stuff and God speaks about this too. Let's look, again, just go ahead and chime in if you've got anything to say about all of this. Here is one of the fullest accounts of the evolutionary journey and the 5 paths. Comes in this book by Ramju Abdullah, Sri Meherabad, His Philosophy and Teachings, published in 1933. And this was his rewrite of some articles published under Baba's name in 1929 in the Mirror Message. And a lot of that, in turn, seems to derive from this material that Baba gave to the Meher Ashram boys. So if we can't work out these problems, all we need to do is catch one of these Meher Ashram boys in their present reincarnation and twist their arm until they fess up and tell us what it was. I think that may be the original dictation for a lot of this stuff, although I'm not 100% sure. Okay, 8,400,000 above, okay. The compact, can you see this? Let me expand a little.
Well, that's a slightly different interpretation. It suggests that the 84 lakhs include the non-human genera.
Yes, here and in Infinite Intelligence 2, Baba said that there are 8,400,000 genuses, genera, in evolution. But then from God Speaks, there is the same number in the human form in reincarnation. So it seems that that number has a significance. And I think I'm sure that number does appear in the tradition. I read it in Gyaneshwar. It's there, and it might be even in the Upanishads or some ancient source like that. So what the significance of that is, I could say a little bit more, but I fundamentally don't know. The compact latent human form takes 4 straight turns, and afterwards 1 inverse turn, in all 5 turns, before it becomes completely manifested. In order to understand these 5 turns, we must glance at some of the species. Okay, and here's this illustration. This was given in the talks to the Meherabad boys. Stone is the first important form which is visible to the naked eye. So Bob is skipping over things like electrons and gases and so forth. Every stone has eyes, nose, mouth, hands, and feet. In fact, a complete body, exactly like the human body. But as it is compact to the last degree, it is extremely latent in this form. You know, there was a scene in the movie version of Lord of the Rings where they're about to get caught by orcs, Sam and Frodo, and they put Galadriel's robe over them, and they look exactly like a rock. And then when they come up, suddenly they're opposites again. It's a nice visual image to go along with this. It is like the cloth doll, which can be made to resemble an uneven piece of stone when it is carefully folded up. With the evolution from stone, these imperceptible, compact parts of its body begin getting unfolded. In the metal kingdom, they are still invisible to the naked eye, but in the vegetable kingdom, the crude manifestation of the latent form is perceptible to some extent. The latent form in the stone evolves with the head going towards the ground and the feet rising up. So the human form is upside down. Gradually becoming upside down in the vegetable form, with the head completely underneath the ground and the feet straight up, as in the case with a tree. The tree form is the first turn of this latent human form. So the 5 turns, this one is clear enough. In stone form, you're just kind of lying there, and probably you're so dumb that you don't know what position.
In a lot of old medieval manuscripts and stuff, you see this image of the head under the ground and the feet and that coming out like a tree.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe a lot of our politicians are still trees.
They've got their heads under the ground. Yeah. Like
It's
the
an image
famous-
you see quite a lot though in
Yeah.
old manuscripts. Sort of
Interesting. So you can see it's that latent human form. The first thing it does is to go upside down and stand on its head.
And now there's also starting to become scientific knowledge that the trees and roots actually communicate
Under the ground.
under the ground.
Oh, okay.
So
Like,
there is
they
communication.
Okay.
send out carbon, don't
Yes,
they?
and there's some sort of thing where the whole forest can network and communicate
Okay.
with each other.
Yeah.
Do you think they gossip? Do you think they backbite?
They probably say, look out, here's someone with a
Here's a human.
chainsaw.
Here comes the human. Oh.
You'll probably say, you see that gum tree up there? The leaves are terrible.
With an haircut.
Needs a haircut, yeah. That's true. A chainsaw, the throat is actually, you cut the tree's throat, as he says right here. Observe a tree carefully. The mesh of roots are the hairs of the head on the tree. The mouth is there, though latent, and so is not seen by the naked eye. Water and manure are given to the trees in order that they may drink and eat. Their bottoms and not on their tops. So you don't sprinkle on the leaves of the tree. You put it right on the ground near where the mouth is. For their mouths are underneath the ground. The entire portion from the throat upwards of the body of every tree stands out on the ground. The lowest visible portion of the trunk is the throat of the tree, and the remaining trunk is its main body. The bigger branches are its hands and feet, and the smaller branches are the fingers of its hands and feet. Back in those days, they seemed to use the word fingers for toes also. With the evolution, let's see, does he say this? Yeah, Baba says elsewhere that there is some tree, he doesn't specify what it is, that shows the human form very clearly because it has, out of its trunk, 4 main branches, and each of those main branches has 5 smaller branches, like 5 fingers and toes. He says there is such a form. With the evolution from the vegetable kingdom, the feet of the crudely manifested inverse human form in the tree gradually comes down and down as the soul passes through the different forms until they, the feet, lie flat on the ground in the form of a worm whose mouth is upward, not underneath the ground. This is the second turn. So from being upside down, you come down, and it sounds like his mouth is upward. I'm not 100% sure. I've looked at a whole bunch of different references. But like the worm is on its back, which seems a bit odd. But are any of you intimate friends with some nice worms?
I've got a worm
It's at the
farm.
front of the body.
Worm farm.
I would have thought they lie in their belly, but anyway, so that's kind of an open question.
But if the mouth were to be at the front of the body, one could still say that and be understood.
Yeah. It makes me wonder whether a banyan tree is not one of the late vegetative forms, because it's like it's dropping its fingers down to the ground. It's almost like it's starting to do like this. I always have the image of someone who knows yoga demonstrating this whole process of going up on your head and then flopping down as a worm and gradually rising up until you reach this position. Maybe in the future,
One of the weird dreams.
I could do some great dances like that to illustrate the whole process. From the worm state, the latent form begins to rise again with its face upwards, and it seems like an important theme. There are I'm just reading from this one, but there are a bunch of materials where these themes keep coming up. Which way the face and eyes are turned seems to matter. Like in fish, they're turned upwards, but in animal forms, the head is slouched and they're looking down, and that seems to matter. Okay, the latent form begins to rise again with its face turned upwards. Now we get its third. The third turn, say to an angle of 60 degrees, occurs in the fish form, whose feet are down, but the upper part of whose body is raised. So he seems to be talking about an angle like that or something. Even when the fish dives down into the water, its eyes remain turned upwards, which may be contrasted. See, that seems to be important, a significant fact. I don't know, have any of your fish friends, have you ever noticed when they dive down, are they looking up? We should get out there with our scuba gear and check it out.
Flounder look up all the time.
Yes.
Huh?
Flounder.
Flounder? Do they look up?
And rays.
And rays.
Uh-huh. How about sharks? Are they looking up?
Well, their eyes are on the
upper part of the body.
And when they dive down? Notice that this detail, so it seems that the orientation of the vision is an important part of the story. Its eyes remain turned upwards, which may be contrasted to those of a human being whose eyes, while diving, are turned downwards. The wings of every fish, they didn't have the word fins, whoever was writing around doing are its compact hands and feet. The last fish form is the waterfowl. And this is just not worded precisely. It would actually be the first bird form after fish. I think the last fish form we've read in some of these materials that we're working on now is the tortoise, I would say. Some Gujarati word that means tortoise. in which this latent form is found to be somewhat erect, and the third form is completed. Now this is where I get confused, because there are many different versions of this and they contradict each other, especially the crab. But once again, through various changes, comes the fourth turn with the face downwards in the form of crab. And that seems very odd, and I tend to think it's a mistake. Elsewhere, the crab is put at the end of the fish sequence, which seems more probable. And one of the things I'm working on, the crab comes after the kangaroo, so there's some garbling, I think, that's happening. So this is the one I don't get. And the bird form gets left out here. For the fourth turn, the feet remain compressed in the form until the inverse turn takes place. So what this is about with bird left out, I don't know. There are other versions of this. The fifth turn takes place in the kangaroo form, and it is inverse because the head begins rising up and manifesting itself. Elsewhere, Baba has definitely said that the kangaroo follows the last of the bird form. In fact. Okay, the principal manifestations of the latent human form in the animal kingdom are those of the kangaroo, the dog, and the monkey. Elsewhere, Baba has mentioned the horse as a significant form for some reason. The kangaroo is the first animal form in which the soul incarnates after passing through the last bird form. Okay, so the bird form does come up here. And that is why its two front legs are so very small. With further progress, the feet begin to get higher and higher, as in bears, lions, etc. But the eyes remain turned downwards. Till in the dog form, the latent human form can actually sit on its hind legs. The last stepping stone which helps the latent human form in completely manifesting itself is the monkey. So the monkey is the last form, some monkey form, the last one before human. The fifth turn is completed in the human form, which is its complete manifestation. Now again, I'm not a sort of a body guy. I've never known much about this sort of thing, but it has occurred to me that maybe the latent human form is doing something like this, and then kind of going like that in animals, and then rising up. Maybe there's some people who know more about this maybe could work out what these 5 turns are.
In yoga, the greeting to the morning sun, the namaste, does all of that.
Yeah.
I've heard that, and I'm wondering.
Have you
Yeah.
Salutation.
Salute to the sun.
Yeah. So it sounds like with the eyes drooping, it might be something like you're starting to get up like that, so you're looking down, maybe.
It actually starts in the erect form, so it kind of God, and then it descends.
Yeah.
It's interesting too.
Yeah.
Now the other thing, I don't know how I've heard, and I'm not sure of it, is that during the fetus goes through all of the stages of evolution before becoming human form.
Yes. I've heard that true, and I've also heard it contested, so I don't actually know.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody knows about this kind of thing.
That's ontogeny
Ontogeny
recapitulate.
recapitulates phylogeny, you know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Ontogeny is the genesis of the individual, and phylogeny is the genesis of the species. So ontogeny recapitulates, phylogeny means the individual, through the course of development, retraces the entire story of the evolution of the species.
So it was a theory that was put forward, but then it was disputed, but I don't think it was disputed very skillfully. What do you reckon?
Yeah. No, it'd be nice if
I've just always accepted it because I
people
like
wanted
those
to.
Yeah.
dig into this. Here's another part of the story of evolution, and that is the 5 elements. And I'm just going to jump a bit, but in the Greek cosmology, metaphysics, natural science, whatever discipline this falls into, there are 4 elements: fire, earth, water, and air. But in the Indian account, there's Akash, or it gets translated as ether. That's a doubtful usefulness. But Akash turns out, as you may recall, those of you who were at a previous one of these sessions, it has a big role in Baba's creation cosmology. So that's one of the 5 elements there. And these get associated. I'm going to flip this at you. This isn't from Baba now. This is from Vedanta and Samkhya. But it gets associated with smell, taste, sight, touch, and hearing. So there's a systematic account of the relation between the human sense organs and the fundamental elements in the cosmos outside. If that is true, it's a big link in this greater story that we're talking about, where the 5 senses connect with the 5 elements in the universe. And Baba has clearly said that he mentioned the 4 of them. These 4 elements emerge very early in the cosmogonic process with the crashing of Pran and Akash. Some of you remember that from a previous week. Pran is prana, energy, and Akash is this spaceless space thing. And when they clash, the 4 elements come out of it. If this is true, as they say in Vedanta and in Samkhya, those are linked to our 5 senses, and our 5 senses are not arbitrary. They show a harmony between us and the cosmos outside. I find that idea to be very appealing, but again, I don't know if it's true, and Baba has never said this that I've seen.
The word individual.
Hmm?
The word individual, of course, means presumably not divided.
Yeah.
Does it?
Individuals, not divided.
Individual.
Not divided, yeah.
Well, didn't Baba mention that 5 elements in the supernatural? Remember in one place Baba says 5 minus 7 equals 12? Is that the human body is made of the 5 elements? In one of the...
Yeah, those are the 5 Bhutan, yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
So Baba... talked about
Yeah,
this kind.
okay, there we do get to 5 elements. You're right about that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. And that would be Baba's coming right out of Indian tradition there. See, we have, from Greek, we have the 4 elements, and Baba mentions them, but actually there are 5 Bhutan. That's a very good connection, I think. I hadn't thought of that one. So if this is true, this is another relevant dimension to our topic today of subtle physiology, how the human physiology is related to the external universe and its primordial elements. Well, Baba does explain how these elements are related, let's see, to the, now I have to go back to Ramju, where I'm just showing Ramju as one of these accounts. There are actually a number of others. Yeah. Okay. How these elements come into the foreground, each in turn, through the evolutionary process. Okay, so here he says the prana and akash thing. Simultaneously with the clash between prana and akasha, or energy and emptiness, fire, water, air, and earth become manifested. Stones and vegetables during their organic evolution have chief connection with earth. Fish have connection with water. Birds with air. Animals with fire. And human beings have connection with all the elements. Now this, certainly the first three make a lot of sense, right? Stones, metals, and so forth. Plants have connection with earth, fish with water, birds with air. That all makes sense. And he explains this more. The earth is found everywhere in the world, since not only dry land, but also the beds of seas, rivers, and lakes contain it. Similarly, water, though visible only in oceans, rivers, lakes, etc., is everywhere, if not on the surface, under the earth, or in larger small quantities. In other words, just as earth lies below the water in seas, rivers, etc., so water lies everywhere under the dry earth, or one wishes it did in some parts of Australia. There is no question of air being not present anywhere in this world. And now this is how fire is related to animals. As regards fire, in the broad sense, viz. A kind of blaze or tej. That's actually the word that Baba probably used when he was explaining this in the first place. As it is called in vernacular, means like in Gujarati and other Indian languages, it is certainly everywhere in the world, but it is covered under the layer of ether. So there he actually mentions the fifth of the elements, which he hasn't tried to explain here, which is ether is undoubtedly the English word for akash. This blaze is the fire that, as said above, has connection with animals. And it is owing to this that hunger heat is so very intense in animals. Almost all animals eat horribly much. So you could tell your dog to kind of, prove his character fast. As if they were born for the sole purpose of eating.
It's like desire, isn't it, when this other thing starts to happen?
Yeah. Baba actually uses the example for this of an elephant in Victoria Gardens in Bombay. And he says, which I guess everybody knew, it's probably a famous elephant in those days. He said that it's just eating all the time. Every time you see it, it's eating. So that's the fire, this is the fire element in animals.
It is quite big, an elephant. It needs to eat a lot.
That's true.
Is it
Sure,
connected
well,
with,
well, Labrador is not that big and it eats a lot too.
is the connection with consuming? The fire consumes
Yes.
things in the same way that eating consumes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about a whale?
Do whales eat a lot?
Every day.
Well,
Constantly.
Here Baba is talking mainly about the material or gross manifestation of fire and earth and water. On a higher stage, it's like water is like a liquid. Fire is not really the gross fire,
Yeah.
the essence of the fire, rather than the gross.
Well, like with hunger that he's talking about, this seems to be, it's not the fires that we have blazing here at Avatar's abode sometimes when we're burning up stuff, but it's actually something more subtle.
The
But
fire in the belly,
the fire in the belly.
the digestive consumption.
Like we have a connection with things with fire in the belly.
Yes. That Baba uses this expression, I think in a Tiffin lecture, of if you really worship the fire, there's a thing, pet puja, they call it. And pet means belly, and puja is doing worship to the belly. That's if you like eat all the time. So animals are good at pet puja.
And the journey, of course, the journey.
I think oxygen is kind of present in both the literal fire and also in the blood to
Yes.
facilitate digestion.
Actually, that's true. So when people start to explore this more, we could get down to the level of chemistry, with oxygen and things like that, the roles that they play in human form. So this is coming back now, just to bring it to mind once more, if this is indeed true, as is routinely said in Vedanta and Samkhya and early things, thus earth is connected with the sense of smell, water with the sense of taste, fire with sight, that seems intuitively obvious, wind with touch, again that kind of is intuitively obvious, and ether or akash or space with hearing, and that kind of makes sense too. It's almost like from space you're getting the sense of hearing. The first two are the ones that are, well, I mean, it's not, anyway, why earth is smell rather than taste.
Well, earth does smell.
It does smell, yeah. The fragrance of the earth comes,
And water carries taste.
carries taste. It actually does make sense, So, if this is in fact true, it would link the five senses with the five elements. And it would also link that chapter of Baba's we're going to look at briefly. I'm covering a lot of material here. A lot of it could be explored much more. But in the 7th chapter of God Speaks, the Sevenfold Veil, Baba talks about entering in through the openings in the face, through the mouth, the nostrils, the ears, and the eyes, which would certainly suggest to me the senses. So there may be a fundamental connection between the senses of the human body and the basic elements of the cosmos without. So this is microcosm, macrocosm connection here. Okay, now here are some of the, Baba gave in various places some indications of the significance of the human anatomy. And he gave several presentations, brief presentations on this topic. And they don't synchronize. So it looks like he gave little pieces here and little pieces there. So here are some of them then.
It's probably all in the book.
It's all in the book, yeah. Come on, John. John's got it.
We want the book.
So here's a Tiffin lecture where Baba goes into this topic. And I could show it right here. We stuck in this Leonardo da Vinci thing to illustrate it. The original just had parts. But the reality corresponds to the crown of the head, the Brahman it's called. By the way, majubs are associated, you know, a majub, a God-realized soul who is experiencing the I am God state and is completely unconscious of creation. They're associated with this spot, part of the body. The divine, the third eye at the point between the eyes. Sadhgurus at the junction between the real and the illusory, moving up and down between the two. So this is where the Sadhgurus have their station. The Majub is up here because the Majub has nothing to do with the lower part. But the Sadhguru is associated with that point because the Sadhguru goes up and goes down both ways. And the Om point is associated with that also. So there's another thing in the human body. Here's where the Om point is represented. And man or mind, yogis in the Manlok. Man means mind. Manas is another form of the same word. Meherabad, what is it? I've forgotten how the Arati Swikaro. Meherabad, Arati Swikaro. Any of you know that? If you've been enough at the Samadhi, you'll get it. Meherabad. So mana. That. And yogis, by yogis in those days, Baba meant people on the plains. So that's associated with here. This is actually mental plane. The pranlok, between the Okay, the ordinary human being, according to this presentation, is located, and it took me, I went through years of torment before I was able to figure out what the plum was. I went to everyone I could imagine. Why? And finally we found the manuscript. The Pearsons had it in Mariposa. They gave the Gujarati word, and it actually means the navel. And that's associated ordinary people in the gross world. So that seems to be gross plane. And pran, between the plum and the windpipe. The windpipe is associated with man or minus, right? Manas. I guess that would be elsewhere Baba has made it clear the fifth plane is connected with that spot. And between the two, so I guess this is the lower plane. This corresponds to this part of the body. When first I was dealing with this Tiffin lecture, I was wondering if Baba was talking about the Kundalini, but it does not seem so, because the Muladhara is located at the base of its spine, for one thing, not the front part of the body. It's also the base of the spine, or he seems to be talking here about the navel. So this seems to be a different scheme. Let me just flip this idea out there, by the way. There seem to be different microcosm, macrocosm patterns that are given with respect to the human body. And so I don't know why this is, but this idea comes to mind. The human form is the product of billions of years of evolution. We're very old. And it is probably vastly significant and figures forth its meanings simultaneously in many different ways. Like it could be the circulatory system tells the story in one way, the nervous system in another way, and so forth. So it's like the greatest poem ever written, with all kinds of meanings inscribed into it. So maybe you can find, if you have the eyes to see, different representations told in the human form. I'm just flipping that out there. I certainly don't know. But that's one way to go with the fact that what we're going to look at next is very different from this one.
So there isn't any indication that the pram is actually the bottom of the sternum, is there?
No, there's not. In fact, it's between the
Well,
navel.
I'm just measuring it.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of thinking about where it is.
Where's the sternum? Oh, you mean?
Well, the sternum goes
Oh.
across here,
Oh, I see.
and so
Yeah. Oh, I guess I don't know that. I'm not sure.
It's more up and down, Lucy.
what do you think? Yeah, so if you go from your windpipe, and it's usually your hand's breadth gets down to it, and then down from your navel up.
Yeah.
Isn't that the sternum then?
I guess it is. I didn't.
Well, I'm just looking that that's a long torso.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
We're going to come to another version of this that may be relevant to, by the way, where he really
I'm only
talks.
saying that because I had a weird experience with my sternum when Barbara was pulling me, and
Oh.
I'm curious about it.
And I was wondering just whether the windpipe, he's not talking about what we seem to think of as the windpipe, but whether
Further down.
further down.
He seems to mean this.
Does he? Okay.
And there's another indication.
Okay.
Where the voice box is. Adam's
Yeah,
apple.
yeah. Yeah, it actually does mean that. The Gujarati phrase means that. But we're going to look at another version of this that he gave to the Meher Ashram boys the next year. But here's the text corresponding to this, just to read it. We ordinary people find our place in the physical world. Sharir lok. Sharir is gross body and lok is place. I.e. in the plum, which is to say in the vicinity of the navel, dunti, not higher. This is what I found in the manuscript from Phyllis Frederick that the Pearsons had. Otherwise, I just had the plum. I spent hours with people who I thought might know. Said, "What in the heck is the plum? Is it the testicles?" Yeah. Ted had the idea of a plumb line. you know.
Mm.
Maybe it does,
He would,
yeah.
he would think.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why I went to him. I'm an architect, maybe he has an angle on this. But then we actually got the phrase, because this was just a blank, a lacuna it's called, in the manuscript, which I cursed about 1 billion times, and then Baba finally provided the Gujarati. Yogis and such others inhabit the pranlok, and the still more advanced, the manlok, or the astral plane. And he used the word astral in those days to mean the inner worlds, not the astral as we
Yeah,
came to know later.
The subtle, I know.
Yes, and here it seems to be referring to even above
Yeah.
the subtle, yeah, the
Okay.
subtle in the greater expanded sense. That is, they occupy the upper half of the body from the plum to the windpipe, and here's the Gujarati phrase, Galani Ganti. Sadgurus occupy the central position between the eyes at the point of what is called the third eye, the Anknivachovach. They descend through the lower planes as far as the plum, and so the navel, right? And then ascend all the way back again to the Brahmand, and that refers to there. That's a big word in Indian cosmology, metaphysics. They have a lot of a significance that they attach to the Brahmand at the top of the head. Thus, the Sadgurus inhabit what could be called the junction between the material and the spiritual, the lower and the higher planes. So that's the place. I think when a Sadguru goes to sleep, they go to the Om point, which is there. The Majubs in the Jivan Mukti abide in the Brahmand, right there, where they enjoy Anant Anand, that's infinite bliss, eternal bliss, retaining no sense or awareness of their gross physical bodies or minds. They are unable to descend from their high station to creation consciousness. They're stuck up there, poor devils up there in the infinite knowledge, power, bliss state. Can't come down and enjoy our beautiful, wonderful world right, as it is right now. So there's one version of this subtle physiology that Baba gave in the Tiffin lectures. Now here's another one in talks Baba gave to the Meherashram boys. Actually, Jeff and I were just going over this. Unfortunately, this one is badly afflicted. I'll show you what these lacuni look like. I know it's a bit hard to see, but see those gaps? That's where they would have filled in with the Gujarati word, but all our manuscripts lack it, so it really decimates this particular bunch of talks. Now here, in these talks to the boys, through evolution, as is related there, Baba had a little doll of a human being, and he put the doll in different positions to show evolution of consciousness. So I wish, I don't know why the mandala didn't bring, yeah, John, where were you with the video camera? I guess Tony was probably, where is Tony right now? He's in
Rainbow Beach.
He was in Rainbow Beach, so they left the camera behind.
Yeah.
And John wasn't here to substitute. I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic to have a video of Baba giving this
yeah.
talk, showing it all?
Yeah.
So here's another talk. This isn't on evolution now, but Baba was explaining the human body from toes to the crown of the head. So this is a more complete mapping of the entire divine theme onto the human body. And he does say at one place, bones, don't forget about bones. So what that suggests to me is that the skeletal system is the basis for this. We were talking earlier about the navel and all this. We're not talking about the skeletal system, but now he is. And just to anticipate, he seems, Okay. We went over, did we go over the asmans and the planes, the heavens and the planes of consciousness? So, did we go over that in one of the, I'm forgetting what we talked about in previous sessions. Anyway, in his talks to the Mir Ashram boys, Baba explained that not only are there 7 planes, with each planes there are various skies or asmans associated with them. So if you get off the plane into the skies or asmans, then you experience these kind of heaven states, I guess you could call them. And there are different numbers associated with each one of them. And he goes into it in some detail with the Mir Ashram boys. It's all connected with this particular thing, by the way. It's all about that. Well, when he's talking about these, he seems to, and Jeff and Tian, please correct me since I've been hearing this stuff too. But joints, it looks like he's associating joints with the different planes. And he says that the skies are asmans. Do you following what asmans are? Okay, Baba gave this analogy. If you're traveling from Ahmednagar to Bombay, the planes would be like railway stations. And the asmans or skies would be like cities that you experience if you leave the station and go out into the city. And if you do that, you get lost in them because they're very intoxicating, and that's probably where the musts were. Okay, anyway, he seems to say that the asmans or skies are hollow spaces in the anatomy located beneath the planes. And the first one is clear. All of the others are a mess because we couldn't figure out what should fill these hollow these lacunae, they're called gaps in the manuscript. But the first case, the first plane is connected with the ankle. And the first asman is connected with the sole of the foot. You see it's sort of a hollow there? That one is clear. But then he goes through the others, but then the third one is a real problem. But the second is the knee. The second plane is connected. Okay, I've jumped right over the phase of evolution. He's, in fact, maybe I can look at the connection. This is the original manuscript, but here's the actual edited text we're working with right now. Okay. All right, this is the 5 toes. All forms from stone to worm are represented in the little toe. Fish form is represented in the 4th toe. Bird form in the 3rd toe. Animal form in the 2nd toe, that longer toe, and then human form is, yeah, you can barely see it, but is in the thumb toe, the big toe. So between the little toe and the big toe, the evolution of consciousness is represented. And now we go up from there. Baba's real focus here was on involution. In this series of talks, he had been telling the boys all about the planes of consciousness and the skies and this unbelievable information he was giving them. And he keeps telling you, I'm going to be giving you an analogy. Listen carefully. All of this relates to the analogy, which he gives at the end of the 2nd talk. And what that analogy has to do with this beats me, but I'm sure you guys will pick it up and snap. Okay. Now, beyond the thumb, so we're ascending now in involution, we find no further toe. Likewise, no further form arises beyond the human. At this stage, having achieved the human form, the Atma now begins its advance through the planes of consciousness as below. The first station or plane, which follows the reversal. That's the turn, where you do a turning when you start the involutionary journey. Corresponds to the ankle. The second station or plane corresponds to the knee. The third station or plane follows, which was the editorial fudge we used for the fact the word is left in the blank. And it's a real thing. A reasonable guess is that it's the hip, because the next one is going to be up here somewhere. So I would think that's likely, but there's no textual evidence for it. And he says the knee, the hollow, in the next Tiffin lecture, the asman associated with the plane. And the second one, the plane is the knee, and the second, he says, is beneath the knee. So I don't know what the heck that would be, unless he means behind. Maybe it's the back of the knee.
What about the knee socket that the ball fits into?
Yeah, maybe there's something there. I spent
It's not a socket, it's a joint.
a joint.
The knee
Yeah.
joint is unique.
Yeah. I spent about 2 hours talking with the doctor going over all of this, and he,
Oh, really?
yeah, but I wasn't, it was inconclusive. But the hip, then what's the hollow beneath that? And he says they're in a line, too, from top to bottom, and it's hard to figure out what that means.
One of the plastic skeleton.
Yeah, I guess you've
Yeah.
got to be there to know it.
Yeah, Baba, this is what's so terrible. You see, very likely the Mandali recording didn't get down what Baba was saying. But he himself would have just pointed, And you know how expressive Baba could be. Darn it. Where was Tony anyway? He shouldn't have.
They brought the thing about the skeleton forming the frame, is,
Yeah.
and that whole notion of being, out of balance when people seek to become back in alignment and all that.
Yes.
And I mean, when you play with skeleton, really and truly, there is a line
There is.
from
there
the
is
toes
that.
and ankles through all the
Oh,
way
there
up.
is.
Absolutely. You can mechanically, when you're working
Uh-huh.
with somebody who's not resisting,
Oh.
the natural capacity is from the body for movement to go all the way through. And it's not straight, but it is in a line.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the plumb line.
Maybe that's the plumb line, yeah.
And we're all connected with sky bone.
Hmm.
Ah,
Yeah.
By the sky hook.
The skyhook. I do remember Bao one time saying, and this would seem to relate to the planes versus the skies, right? The asmans, if you're following what that is. He said that people like saliks travel up the front of the body, and yogis who go through the skies or asmans travel up the back of the body. So maybe that has something to do with this. But Baba says that the hollows are beneath the planes, whatever that means. By the way, this probably is related to prana and akash. I won't try to explain all of that, but the akash is the negation and prana is the affirmation, the plus and the minus. Okay, so the next station is the fourth, associated with the armpit. And it's again, the text is a muddle, but what seems most likely is that the plane is connected with the shoulder and the asman with the shoulder, the armpit. And that one actually does work in this whole scheme. And here the spiritual pilgrim needs a great check in his progress. How so? At this stage, the 7 cities or powers come into play. Now this is quite fascinating. At least I find it to be so. They correspond to the 5 fingers and 2 major joints, elbow and wrist. Now 7 cities, those are powers, like occult powers. And you know how on the 4th plane you get the grand occult powers. You can create your own universes and raise the dead and have all sorts of fun. And so he's linking those with this parts of the skeletal anatomy, the 5 fingers, the wrist, and the elbow there. So this is a strong argument that the 4th plane must be at the head of that, which is here, since it's quite the textual problems are really serious for all of this. If the pilgrim refrains from the use of these powers, then progress on the spiritual journey proceeds onwards unimpeded. But if they are used, gradually the center of movement descends from the shoulder joint, and that I put in. If you want to find out why, you can read the footnote, and it will go on for several pages. Poor Jeff had to go through that torture the other day. Through the upper and lower parts of the arm on to the fingers. Since from the fingertips this movement has no pathway by which to continue within the human body, it tumbles all the way down to the earth, which is to say, to the stone form. So you get that? If you're misusing the powers, there's nothing, so you go down to the little toe, right? Which we saw earlier with stone.
And the magicians do this thing all the time, like,
Didn't Barbara say that if you misused your powers on the second plane you convert to stone?
Fourth.
Fourth, is it?
He does talk here about falling down from the second plane back to gross consciousness. You don't go below human form.
Okay.
But this is the one place, and you see the human body is a mirror to it.
Yeah.
From the tips of the fingers
Yeah.
down to your toe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of an amazing
Yeah.
picture of the significance of the
Yeah.
human body. I've never seen such a thing before.
And when people get very agitated and in their own power, they do a lot of this stuff at each other, and all this, hand energy happens.
Wow. So this homology associating the planes with parts of the human body clearly shows why the traveler in the fourth plane falls all the way down to stone form if he uses his powers. Now here is one other thing, and now this is an association I'm making. Baba didn't exactly make this connection, but Baba did say in these talks, not this one, but elsewhere, in these talks to the boys, at the fourth plane, the path goes around a very sharp curve. A sharp curve, like on a road going up mountains, suddenly there's a sharp curve. And he gave this analogy too. He said, if you're driving too fast and you come to a curve, you tumble off. And that's what happens on the fourth plane. Well, this is the connection Baba didn't make exactly here, but it strikes me as possible that he's been talking about a straight vertical movement up the body and a binary structure. There are two ankles, two soles of feet, two knees, two hips, if that is indeed the part of the body, two shoulders. The next one is going to be here, the windpipe, and there's only one of them. And there's a sharp turn here. So maybe that is mirroring the turn that the path takes. Again, Baba didn't say that, but Baba did say there's a sharp turn. And it is impossible not to notice that we're going from 2 to 1 on the fifth plane. And is that significant?
And also that once we are at the mental plane, there's no
falling.
forward.
No danger.
Yeah.
And you can see from here, but from here, no. You're going up. And Baba again refers to some kind of a hollow. And my doctor guru, I don't know, maybe, what do you call this whole part of the skeletal frame around the neck?
Collarbone?
Collarbone, this whole area. And the clavicle, yeah. And the, maybe this is all that larynx, that whole area.
There is a hollow if you put your
There is,
Yeah.
there's a hollow, definitely a hollow.
Maybe that's the hollow, yeah, that he's talking about.
And it's on both sides.
So there are songs connected with the fifth and sixth planes?
Yes, there are asmans there. He says they're the plane, he said that they're very widely separated, like in the third plane. In the fourth plane, they're quite close to each other. In the sixth plane, he said, they're so close as to be almost indifferentiable. So I think it's like the point here and then the forehead around it or something. And in the seventh plane, they're I mean, everything is merged in the seventh plane, which is right up here. Yeah. So, is there anything more to, so this is quite a fascinating rendering of the subtle physiology that we.
With the lower planes, if one falls from the lower planes, at most one
Yeah.
slides down to the level of ordinary gross consciousness, but no lower.
Yes. Right, because from here, you know, that it's like, you go back down to there again. But not from the fourth plane, because you've got the whole arm you've gone down. Yeah, that is, if one uses the powers of the lower planes and has to regress, retarded in one's onward advance. Baba here was telling them that that can happen. Then from the first, second, or third plane, or analogically from ankle, knee, etc. I put in etc. because you don't have to warrant to say hip, because that word was never filled in. One tumbles down to ordinary human form gross consciousness represented by the thumb toe. So much for the fourth plane. Now we arrive at the fifth, which corresponds to the windpipe. Falls from the first, second, third, and fourth planes we have discussed above. But with respect to the fifth plane, when a fifth planer leaves his body, he does not fall, but takes rebirth in the same plane that he inhabited at the time of his previous death. Baba does say in the first three planes, if you're traveling without a master, you go back down to ordinary gross consciousness, and you have to do it again.
Wow.
Let's find the master.
But if you're doing it with a master, and he's
Yeah.
talking about going through the planes with a
Yeah.
master, it would seem, that doesn't happen. You resume right where you were.
Okay.
Without a master, you have to do it over. It's like you get climbing a mountain and
How
you've
do
got
you
to...
get, how do you get a master at that point?
What? At what point?
Where you have to do it over?
Well, you just do it
Well,
over without a
probably
master.
at some
First time,
stage, but at some stage then in the gross body, you'll then, I'd say the master will eventually appear to you and go, boy, you've done that now 5 times, let's just try it.
Right.
I'll take it, don't worry.
So you, okay. That's-
So did you hear the stories about Greta Garbo? Because I certainly heard them in India. So did she get to the second plane and have to go back, or the fifth, or the fourth?
I don't know which plane it was.
But that was why she was so tragic, was what people said. But I can't remember who told the story.
I did read, but where Baba didn't say the plane, but did indicate that she had fallen back. Yeah, it was a yoga prashta in that sense, went back down to gross consciousness. Baba told Mercedes that maybe Baba was just making Mercedes feel good. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was her friend,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
who was closely connected with Baba,
Yeah.
actually. Mercedes was, but Baba said that
But
Greta
then she
Garbo.
left him, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. But that Greta Garbo, even though she did, when she did bad things, she would instantly suffer the recoil from it. So she wasn't getting bound by it. That's true, it's nice.
So you don't know what the plane was that she, but now
No.
Baba drove around her house in Hollywood.
Yeah,
Do you remember how many times that was?
I'm not sure. I have the idea of 7, but maybe I'm just putting that number on it.
No,
I wonder if it could correlate to whatever plane she was on.
Yeah. So the sixth plane is associated with what we call the third eye at the center point. Oh gosh. I know there's so much more we could say on these topics. Between the two eyes, one who leaves the body here in the sixth plane proceeds directly to the seventh plane, corresponds with the Brahman, or crown of the head, since the sixth plane is immediately linked with the seventh, just as the point between the eyebrows is the crown of the head of the human body. Yet even though the sixth plane is so directly connected with the Brahman in the seventh plane, even though they are so near to each other, yet to cross from here to here, from the sixth to the seventh, is most difficult. Watch and see. And here he gives another thing about this analogy. If you mark it closely, all of the movements that we have been describing from the first to the sixth plane, from the thumb toe to the point between the eyebrows, has been in one direction, that is, a straight vertical ascent, although there does seem to be a curve here, which he doesn't mention at this point. But such is not the case between the 6th and the 7th plane. Here the direction changes. The course of movement takes a turn, and what a sharp and difficult turn it is. Indeed, one cannot accomplish this turn without the help of a subgroup. Now again, Baba was probably showing this so they could see just what he meant. But I would imagine it's sort of like the backward turn or something.
The turn away from mind,
Yes. So
from your own mind.
right, from here to room.
Mm.
So there's it's not just vertical, it's, anyway.
Like Plato and the cave, I'm thinking.
Mhm. Yeah. Again, what a pity that we can't see Baba showing
One
it.
of the things, well, this was just my understanding, I don't know where I got it from,
Oh.
that there's the void between the 6th and the 7th plane, and the only thing
Yeah.
that can take you across the void is love. There is no other way to get across,
Yeah.
because you're giving up all that you know you are.
Yeah,
One thing to see God, I'm still seeing God.
right.
Now you're being asked, give away that eye. Hang about, that's all I know.
Right. It's beyond
Mm.
the human ability
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah,
It takes grace.
goes
Grace of the Master.
in and then up.
Yeah. So Baba was illustrating, I'm assuming, was illustrating something. Can you imagine the scene? Baba's up on the hill and it's all dark and Petromex lanterns and all these boys arrayed before him, and he's showing all of this to
I wonder
these
they all started
kids.
crying.
Huh?
I wonder they all started crying.
Oh yeah, that was going on through this time.
I know.
Yeah, this whole period. And a bunch of them, actually, it was a few days after this, like Chota Baba went up to the 6th plane, and all this stuff was, unbelievable developments. Okay, remember, all of this that I've been explaining only serves as an introduction to the main analogy we'll be going over tomorrow. So let's jump to that so that you guys can solve this. He has another one. Now he starts to talk about the Asmans. I've been sort of giving a bit of that. But all of this, he said, was preliminary to this analogy. And it's a fascinating analogy, but what the heck it has to do with this business of parts of the body is beyond me. In fact, all of it's beyond me. Remember, all of these points of the body are exactly as I have indicated here. In other words, like I've been pointing to.
Yeah.
All of this has been given by way of an introduction. He's been blowing his horn for the last 2 days about, I'm going to give you an analogy. This is to prepare you for it. So now we get it. Now we come to the analogy itself. Picture a palace. It has a single door, but no windows. It stands on 3 pillars. It has 7 walls, one of iron, another of zinc, a third of silver, a fourth of gold, a fifth of stone, a sixth of wood, and a 7th pearls. In front of the palace extends a compound with 3 ponds, one filled with water, one with milk, and one with rose water. Moving out from the compound, there runs a lane. 7 tigers guard this lane. As each bunch of flowers,
At the far end of the lane.
at the far end of the lane, there blooms a garden full of sweet-smelling flowers. Surrounding each bunch of flowers is a mandap. That's one of these little structures that they'll use to have weddings in, or if you see an Indian movie, the lovers will be dancing there.
We call them rotundas.
Rotundas. Okay, is a rotunda.
Well,
There we
there's a
go.
mandap near the opposite the tomb.
Yes.
Bigger one.
Mhm. Within each bunch of flowers is a snake. When you emerge from the garden, there opens before you a desert. After crossing the desert, you arrive at a river. On the far side of the river arises a great city. With this, our analogy is finished.
Wow.
With this introduction and extended analogy, the whole of Vedanta is intellectually opened up for the one who is made to understand it. This analogy has never been given before. Adding one last detail to the analogy, in that palace which I have referred to is seated a king. So, anyone want to explain that?
Yeah,
It's a wonderful, I mean, I love it.
yeah, full on that, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, in and of itself, it's quite mysterious,
Yeah.
but then relating to this whole thing about joints. Anyway,
Any wonder they went to the sixth plane.
yeah. They said, well, I don't really understand it, Baba, but I'll report back tomorrow. I'm going to the sixth plane. Yeah. Yeah. So this is quite an amazing,
That's, yeah.
Maybe-
I'll take a photo.
maybe we'll get Ibn Arabis who will come along and say, piece
I'm
of
gonna
cake,
wait
this
for
is what it means.
What you tell us, what do you think of this analogy?
Yeah.
I've got to wait till this thing sets up.
Well, generally speaking, it seems like that inner room is like the immediate presence of God. And I think of the city beyond the river and the desert as the generality of humanity. So I think it's going from inner to outer. I would say that much. Do you agree?
I do.
Yeah.
There's only one way in and no way to look out.
Yeah, no windows.
And what are the three pillars then?
I mean, maybe it's something like
Three-
knowledge, power, bliss, or something.
Can I attempt a little hermeneutic interpretation?
Huh? Yeah.
I agree that when you said it's from the inner to the outer,
Yeah.
it has a single door but no windows.
Yeah.
It seems that the single door is what the Vedas they call the 10th door, the third eye, because we have
Yes.
9 openings in the body, or the 7 in the face.
Yeah.
The 10th one is the one, the inner one.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it.
Yeah.
The 10th door, which is the third eye,
Yeah.
stands on 3 pillars,
Hmm.
Sat, Chit, and Nand.
Yeah. Or how about knowledge, power, bliss?
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 words, the way Baba uses
Yeah.
the 7 plans and the 7 evolution. In one
Although
of
this
the,
is on that very, seems like the palace itself.
yeah, in one, of course, Baba is describing in a different way here the cosmology.
By the way, Chinese metaphysics have 5 elements. And one is metal and one is wood, and both of those are represented here. Iron and a piece of wood, the 6th.
Even with Chipa's Chipan, Baba talks about the plants as compound within.
Mm-hmm.
And Francis also, in Stay with God, talk about the 7 citadels.
Mm-hmm.
So that reminds me of that, these 7 words.
Mm.
And then, you know about this compound, could be the extension of the power, knowledge, bliss, the 3 pounds. But then the land with the 7 tigers, the Taoists use the figure of tiger a lot, which are guarding each of the,
One thought that comes to me about the tigers, I'm not invested in this at all, but it's the 7 desires.
could be that. But
Waiting
But-
to get you.
Yeah.
But the desires also can be
It's a
transformed
Right.
into the fire, into illumination.
Mhm.
Yeah,
The far
so-
end of the garden seems to be outside, beyond the lane and beyond the tigers.
So in that case, the tiger not just the desires, they are like the energies,
Mhm.
quality energies that can be transformed. Then the king, which is seated in the palace, what the
That sounds like God,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the master, Meherabad.
in the 6th platform sutra,
Yeah.
William talks about the
Mm.
mind.
Certainly give those boys something to think about.
Yeah.
Why put a snake in with a bunch of flowers?
Because each of the things of the pleasures that attracts you
Can also kill you.
can
But there's
also
something like
destroy.
knowledge as well. The snake is knowledge as well.
That's
Mm.
true.
But obviously the palace is the end destination.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
It's that inner chamber where God is.
Mm.
seen, visible. I think of it as the mental planes. Something
Have
like
we
that.
looked at Saint Teresa's, the mansion, she's...
Yeah, seven-chambered mansion,
mansion.
whatever it is.
Yes.
That'll be a nice comparison to
Did
make.
Baba go on to go back to this at all?
No.
Anyone? Nothing.
That's it.
Did anyone else do this? Did anyone else approach this and try to decipher it? Is it in writing somewhere?
It might be in about the mischievous chicken, I'm not sure, I don't
No,
remember.
he didn't.
Yeah.
No, he didn't talk about it.
The fact that that king is in the palace, which is
Yeah.
the starting point, is somewhat comforting.
Yes,
As
it
the
is.
avatar or whatever.
That sounds like him.
No,
And
The
no
master
wonder
of
hardly anybody gets there.
the thing that,
There's not a crowd
Yeah.
on the road.
Right.
Or it's not like Mount Everest
The other
today.
possibility of the king is one true
Self, right?
Yeah.
The reality, yeah.
So this
Or do
comes
you
out of
have
the
any-
talks that he was having with the boys?
Oh, this is the text of it, yeah. He says, "These things which I have told you have never before been revealed by any among the saints. Now they are being revealed to you, since the time is fast approaching." Let me just read this. It's not on topic, but it's very interesting. Baba went on to give a pair of similes or comparisons. First, comparing the good luck of the boys with the fortunes of Changdev, the great yogi of the fourth plane. If you know the story of Gyaneshwar, he's the yogi. He went and challenged Gyaneshwar riding on a tiger.
yeah.
And met up with the Gyaneshwar, who was made perfect only after thousands of years. So he was like thousands of years old. He was 1,000 years old, and he went and challenged Gyaneshwar as this whippersnapper 10-year-old, who, by the way, was a perfect master, as was his older brother. And another in the family was a Jivan Mukta, and another was on the sixth plane.
It was
They-
Bradley important.
That's right,
That was
yeah.
a dynasty, wasn't it?
And they were all complete outcasts in their village for a whole story that's Eric's love has told one of his best. After that, so Baba is comparing the boys to Changdev. Isn't that interesting? Here they are kids, but in other words, their good luck has come. So it sounds like they're not circle members. They're these people who are being brought in. Baba told them they weren't circle members. The second, I'm mixing up. There's another place where Baba talked about a fourth planer who achieved realization of the master, as a matter of fact. And Baba said it's the only case that that's ever happened.
Going back to the fourth plane,
Hmm.
that's a real stumbling block for me because it seems like he's really testing you at that point. To give you your powers and if you use them, then you lose them.
Yeah,
That's why you pray to be taken blindfolded through the plane.
yeah.
But you still have your heart, you still have others.
But you're blindfolded, which means you don't
You can't see.
Baba said he veiled
he veils
His
his
lovers.
lovers.
Ah.
So that they
so
won't
that they
be
don't
distracted.
fall into
Well,
the
you know,
trap.
It does seem true, doesn't it?
We're very vain. Especially
Some of us
with an
are such-
Australian accent, vile.
Some of us, like me, are such outstanding lovers that we bring our own veil with us, and Baba doesn't have it.
right.
Like lush green egg are so thick, no danger. He doesn't have to put a veil on.
Lord, I've just found a quote that came into my head in the first second, of your speech, which I heard about 40 years ago, driving up the Blue Mountains. I'll never forget it. And it turns out to be Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
And then it's a Rabbi Joshua Ben Levi, and he said, a procession of angels passes before each person, and the heralds go before them saying, make way for the image of God. How about that, dude?
I'm going to go on because there's other pieces of this story that.
You'll have to come back next year.
Yeah, I mean, you can see this is a big topic actually. But let me see.
You can do it all again because we'll have forgotten.
Yeah, that's true. It takes a long time to really assimilate this kind of material.
That analogy he has, it seems familiar. It's never been written up anywhere else, or anybody, the Mandali allude to it in any way or anything?
I've never seen it, and Baba said it's never been given before
Yeah.
by any of the saints. It's a new analogy. And if you understand it, all of Vedanta is unfolded.
Yeah.
The analogy itself is quite an intriguing one, but then he's been
Related to
representing
the body.
this as related to his
Yeah.
whole account of the skeletal system.
Yeah.
I personally, I mean, I think we're going to get great spiritual giants are going to come along, as they always do.
Yeah.
And somebody will just explain it.
Mhm.
We'll know what it means.
One of those masks.
Yeah,
Mm.
these great
Or
souls.
these boys.
Or the reincarnated boys.
Now let's see, here's just a, oops, that's not the right place, yeah. Okay, here's another version of this. Actually, Tien was the one who alerted me to this. Another analogy, I don't know, maybe this is just an analogy, not of deeper significance, I don't know. But the emanation of the world is, as it were, a descent from the navel of a man along one leg. The reincarnations of the soul in human form is a wandering in the wilderness of Maya, illusion, between the legs of a man.
This is in Balnatu's book as well.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, I'll show you next time I see you.
Oh. I'm just going to deal with this quickly because I want to get to some other things, but just before, I don't want to leave it out. And the onward ascent of consciousness through the planes to the realization of the original infinite beyond is like the slow and gradual ascent of an ant along the other leg, back to the navel from which the creation started.
So
that
in
means-
Balnatu it talks about
Hmm.
it coming down the left leg and then you hook onto the big toe of the right foot and climb up. And then in the middle is I think the term was the fumbly jumbly, where all the trouble starts.
Oh, well, the fumbly jumbly got left out of this and we got the navel instead.
So that was in the 60s that Baba told that
Oh.
where Balnatu took that down.
Oh, this is in the new book of
Yeah,
Balnatu's?
I'll show
Oh,
you.
good, I'm glad to hear about that.
It's absolutely hilariously good.
Hmm. Now, there are a bunch
I'm
of,
sure it's fumbly jumbly.
let's see if I can,
I'll have to go back and have a look.
here's the actual source for this material. We found this in Chanji's diaries, and it's quite, okay, what we're coming to now is Baba's explanations about the Sadhguru's circle members. And, you know, there are discourses on it. There are 2 discourses on that. And there's various information in Tiffin lectures, you'll find this. In fact, even this image is there. And then it's all rendered into Roman text below. But Baba gave some new information about the circles of a Sadhguru. One is he mentions the 12. He doesn't mention the 2 appendages, but of the 12, one of them goes out and is gone. And then there are only 11. And then he keeps talking about the 11. That number turns out to be an important one for ways that I won't try to go into now. But he also says that the Sadhguru has an outer circle of 56. We've heard from God Speaks, there are always 56 God-realized souls in creation. So we've seen the number that way. But each Sadhguru has an outer circle of 56. And both the 11 and the 56 correspond to parts of the body. He didn't say what the 56 were, but he says unambiguously that they do. So what I'm gathering from this is like the Sadhguru's body is, different parts of it are represented in different members of the circle. And he certainly said that about the 11 or the 12. And in fact, you'll find more of that in discourses, which we'll get in a second. But here's, okay, I'll just read through. I know these are just, here's the original, you know, Chanji's notes, right? He's just taking this down from Baba. But the one universal through all 56 works. The one works through the 56. Of these 56, 5 are Sadhgurus, 51 Satpurushas. But all are realized, nay, Saliks, Acharyas. So he's talking about the 56 who are always part of the spiritual hierarchy on earth at all times. This is in God Speaks too, with a duty assigned to each. Each of these 56 have 56 in their alag circle. Again, these 50, so each of the 56 God-realized souls has a circle of 56.
They're not doing a very good job at the moment.
No, they're making a mess of it. But he even multiplies 56 times 56 equals, and whatever the number is, that is done there too, so he really means it. So there's a circle of 56, so 11 are masters, 11 seers, so they're not all God-realized. There are others who are not. But this is what I wanted to get to. These 11 indicate 11 different parts of the human body. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 2 hands, 2 feet, nose, and maybe mouth. So, and there are various statements like this that seem to indicate that this corresponds to parts of the Sadhguru's body. And in fact, we get that in one of the discourses, which some of you may be acquainted with. Where is it? Yeah. This is from the revised 6th edition of the Discourses. It wasn't in the original Discourses, but it got published in the Awakener magazine in 1954 and got included in the 7th edition, so some of you may have seen it there. But if you get interested in this topic, I suggest you not look at the 7th edition, but look at the reproduction of it here in the revised 6th edition, volume 4, which reproduces from the Awakener, because they did some editorial tweaks in the 7th edition that obscured.
Which is the 7th edition? Is that
The
the
one
one volume?
The one
Okay.
volume version, yeah.
Okay.
I think it was a certain squeamishness that prompted it, but anyway, let's see. Yeah, okay, so here it is. So he's talking about the inner circle of the avatar. The inner circle of the avatar in relation to the avatar may be compared to that of a man who directly associates himself with the 14 parts of his own body. So now Baba has explained there's 12 plus 2 appendages, right? Some of you may remember that. That he hadn't told them about the 2 earlier, back in the 1920s. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, 2 hands, 2 legs, and the trunk of the body itself, we're up to 12 now, plus the external genitals and anus that act as the appendage to the body as a whole. As soon as a man is born, he directly makes use of these 14 parts of his body, and these parts in turn respond to his dictates individually or collectively. Similarly, with the advent of the avatar on earth, his inner circle of the same 12 individuals and the appendage of the same 2 individuals directly begin to function individually and collectively according to the dictates of the avatar itself. So here's another account of subtle physiology with the 14 parts of the avatar's body corresponding to members of his inner circle, it would seem. And also, I'm just going to throw these things out now because, time is short. But Baba, I mentioned, we had our session on Pran and Akash earlier. There's an initial clash between Pran and Akash. And Akash, which is space, winds up corresponding to the gross sphere, right? And Pran, which is movement or energy or dynamism, or in one form of it, prana, as it's talked about in yoga and stuff, corresponds to the entire inner world from the first plane to the 6th, which Baba called the subtle back in those days. Well, in terms of the human body, that corresponds, this is the Akash part corresponding to the gross up to here. And Pran is this part of the body. there. And notice of these 12 parts, 7 are up here and 7 are down here, right? Mouth, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 2 eyes. That's what he mentions. Those are up in the prana part of it. And 2 arms, 2 legs, trunk of the body, anus and genitals. That's below in the gross section of it. And now in God Speaks, I'm just going through this kind of quickly, the 7th chapter called the Sevenfold Veil. Baba says that when you progress from the 1st to the 5th plane, there's a veil with 7 folds in it, and 7 knots, and 7 deep dark colors, and his 7 categories of 7. When you enter into the plane, you enter in through the mouth. He doesn't explain what this means, but you go through the mouth. When you enter into the 2nd plane, the left nostril, 3rd plane, the right nostril. When you enter in through the 4th plane, you're going in through both ears at once. And when you go from the 4th to the 5th planes, it's a 2-fold achievement through both eyes at once. Well, this is the 7 openings in the face that he's mentioned here, right? And it would certainly, to my mind, suggest a relation to the senses that we were talking about, organs of sense. And we saw earlier in Vedanta that's connected with the 5 elements, right? And so by the time you get to the 5th plane, you've gone in through all the openings of the face. And now you see all the folds of the veil are gone, and you're now faced towards God. Now what this suggests to me is, gross conscious people like me, we look out. Well, you have to turn around and look in. So between the 1st and the 5th plane, it seems to me, you're doing this by going in through the organs of sense until by the 5th plane, you're turned around and you're looking in instead of looking out. And I always have in mind at one of these movies, contemporary movies, where somebody's like, and the face, instead of facing out, it's like, boom, and you're looking in instead, because you've gone in through all the organs of sense. And now they're all joined in one single sense. On the 5th plane, you're looking in, but the veil is still there. And then between the 5th and the 6th, the veil is lifted, and now you see God face to face. This is in the 7th chapter of God Speaks, where Baba talks about this. So here's a further explanation about this subtle physiology business in a way that it seems to me would relate also to the 5 senses. It suggests that to my mind. Baba doesn't bring that out. But we're actually at 12 o'clock. There's a whole other aspect of this. But next year. Okay.
Thank you.
Any last comments or anything before we go?
What are
I have a
we missing?
question. Like the
Yeah.
indriyas, the inner senses Baba talks about. First, one fold after another is unreal.
Yeah.
Do you think they are connected with the experiences on the planet? For example, the
Yeah.
smell, the sight, the hearing?
I bet they are. It's so that I think it's, Baba says on the 2nd plane, is that right? The sense of smell
Yeah.
is extremely strong.
Well, there's no.
And when you're going from the 1st to the 2nd plane, you're going in through the left nostril. So that seems
Yeah.
connected to me.
Then the fifth is sight.
My sense of smell is getting worse. I'm not doing too well.
Well, that's because you're beyond the 2nd plane now.
Oh,
You've left it
okay.
behind.
Thank you, Ward.
But, you might be on the 4th plane, so be careful, John.
And then your hearing goes. Then your hearing
If your
goes,
hearing
you're
goes-
actually-
Hey,
You're actually on the 5th, it's coming up to the what's
You're
that?
coming up to the 5th plane. No, if your hearing is going, you're going up to the 5th plane.
So as with the embryo, you go through all the stages of evolution, then you go the other way.
That's right. You become a stone at the end.
Can I just
Yeah.
ask what was in the hour that we were seeing? And can we do it another time?
Yeah, no, it's actually the real significance of this.
Oh, now you say, it's like Barbara and the analogy.
Yeah, the perfect man, al insan al kamil, the five presences, and how those are all embodied in the perfect man, al insan al kamil, and also how that. There are really quite a few things, but another topic I just wanted to get to was the possibility, Baba hasn't said this, but that all of this is part of the significance of the avatar. That is, when the avatar descends into the human form, in these various ways, he is pervading every single form. I'll just say this much. Every single form. You know how Baba has always said he's everyone and everything?
Yeah.
I always took that to mean he's the self of myself, capital S of my little self, and which is true. But this would suggest another dimension to that. He's not just that. He is all my formality as well. He's all my form. Because as that human form is latent within everything, when as avatar he descends into that human form, he's within the form of every form.
Yeah.
So he's down to my very fingertips.
Yeah.
It explains some of what the significance of avatar is. A perfect master doesn't do that.
So that would explain I'm closer to you than your very breath.
That's right. It's not just that he's the self within me. We take that
Yeah.
for granted. But the breath too.
Yeah.
Everything, because he is, so when Baba wiggles a little finger, that is happening in some essential way in every single form in the entire universe, because he is that.
And that would explain too
Yeah.
what he said, that to the horse he appears as a horse, to the
I was
bird
gonna
he
read that.
appears as a bird, to that, in
Right.
each form he appears as that form. To that.
I was going to read that very passage. Yeah.
So Mustang thought he was being stroked by another dog.
Yeah.
By the dog.
He is the dog.
The king dog. The king dog.
The one.
The hot dog.
So all of this subtle physiology stuff would be pertinent then to his way of working within everyone.
Yeah.
Because the significance of the human form would be part of who he is, working within every single form in creation. Again, Baba didn't say this exactly, but to me it makes perfect sense.
Well, he said he was everything.
He certainly said
And
that.
that includes every atom, every cell, all of it.
There's no doubt about that. Baba
But
said that.
sometimes there's a long gap between the saying of it. Because I mean, Maestro Eckhart said at one stage, I have always believed what God has said about himself, that he is omnipresent.
Yes.
But to get to that stage where you understand what being omnipresent means,
Right.
it's easy to have it up here.
Right.
But to feel it here is a totally different thing, I suspect.
And this gets him not just to the depths of us, but even to all the surface of us and all the levels between. He's all of that too, because he is the human form that is in every single form.
Yeah.
And he becomes the.
Yeah.
You know, I have the image. I'm forgetting the mathematical term, but there's a real form, and then there are innumerable refractions of it, or images of it, or fractals. That's what fractals.
Yeah.
Innumerable fractals of it.
Yeah.
Well, we're the fractals,
Yeah.
but he's the reality of that human form within every fractal. So he can say, "I'm John." Well, he really is.
Yeah.
Like
He
the
has
hair is
spiritual
coming out of our
himself
nostrils.
in us,
Yeah. He fills.
as I say.
In Hafizz's poem,
As he says.
he alludes to that in a number of cases where he talks about stroking, I stroke your, I'm there in every movement of every part of your body,
Yeah.
literally.
And I've always accepted those things as, yes, Bobby, you said it, so I
Yeah.
believe it. But this makes it more vivid to me. He actually fills the human form, and through the human form, fills everything. Again, this idea that the human form is present in every form in creation, this looks to me like a very important original revelation given by our avatar that has never been given before. If I'm wrong, please tell me, but I haven't seen this ever said before anywhere.
Even
This
the
whole
angels,
kind of evolution.
even the angels are depicted in human form.
Mhm.
Good
They are
point.
too.
Is there any chance, is there any kind of soiree type moment in the next week where this could happen, where you could talk more about that?
You're always working in soiree time.
It's a
Well,
heck of
I
a
think
week,
this is important.
unfortunately.
I can
It's a
tweak
murderous
my
week.
soirees. What was that?
I think next year is the thing to go for, don't you?
Can't wait.
I think it's just a difficult time of the year.
Yeah, this we're so crowded
Then you'll
right
know.
now.
You won't need it.
And,
And it gets them to come back.
and thank you.
Yes.
Well,
And
thank you everyone for sitting through all of
And
these
thank you
things.
from me too.
And before everybody hops up and leaves, I have an ambition that before we all leave today, we can have everything out of this hall part. So the chairs can go out, including like all of the chairs, and we're going to roll up the carpet so the floor can be washed this afternoon. So is